Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mysidian Legend, the only FFTCG podcast that now has 3 Canadians on it. So if it's your first time listening, each week we're going to cover our locals experience, including our deck lists and how we can improve our play in the future. And if we have extra time, or maybe we didn't make it out to locals, then we're going to highlight different cards or decks that we're working on with each other. But we have 2 out of 3 of us that went to locals this week, so it's going to be a good week. So we'll get to that in just a second. But before we get started, I'm going to mention our deal with Cards of E-Release. So if you do shop there, then you can use the promo code PORUMPALUM10 for your purchase, and when you do that, it shows that you support the Mysidia Post, and it gets you a nice discount on your order, so that's pretty neat. So that code is PORUMPALUM10, and then now we're going to get into it. So today I have David with me as usual, but I also have Julian. So you guys say hey.
Hey everybody.
Awesome. I should have said who specifically should say hey. So you guys all know David, of course. Julian, you might actually recognize the name because we recently did a deck tech on the MysidiaPost.com, and we did an article on a Rydia deck list, and that whole thing was based on Julian's list. So it's super exciting to have Julian on today, and he actually played his Rydia list at locals this week, so we're going to hear all about it.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. So then, without further ado, let's get into what our deck lists were for this week and kind of talk about what our plan was. Okay, so Julian, why don't we start off with your deck list?
Yeah, sure. So, like you mentioned earlier, the deck list that I did play was featured in one of your deck techs last week. So I did bring that deck list. I did make a few changes, but it's the same deck list that I've usually played. I've changed up a couple of things. I put in a Bahamut Zero to test that out, and I put in a Galdies. So, but the deck list should be up on the screen for you guys.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So why don't you talk a little bit about just like a basic overview of how the deck works in case some people haven't read the article yet, and then we can go into a little more. Yeah,
for sure. So the deck aims to get card advantage by casting big summons for free via Ajito, Marujito, or Rydia. So the big summons are things like Raiden and Bahamut. So what I aim to do is build backups early, and when my opponent plays some forwards out, then I can maybe take a damage, hopefully get an EX, but if not, I can develop further by playing a Jito, breaking 2 of their backups by casting a Bahamut, or playing a Rydia, breaking their backups, getting a little bit of pressure on the board. Something like that. Yeah, that's the idea of the deck.
Yeah, and so you're only running 16 forwards and 16 summons, so the same number of forwards and summons, but a big part of it is that your deck has a ton of recursions for summons and for characters, so you can kind of pitch what you need to, and you don't have to worry about getting it back later.
That's correct.
And you also never have to worry about Fail Thanos because you have, I guess all of your summons can kill him, right?
Yes, I would be very happy to see my opponent pay 7 for Fail Thanos. That would be my dream.
Now, I've played against this deck since you started building it in Opus 9, and it was pretty amazing back then, but not consistent. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Back in Opus 9, I did not have access to free CP Shantoto, so I was playing 1 copy of the 7 CP Shantoto instead. In fact, I actually just played some Iluas in my free drop forward slot just so I could finish the game. But now with the inclusion of the new legendary Shantoto, that's replaced Ilua, and she's also pretty good in that spot.
So do you think Shantoto and Doga have really had a huge impact on this deck, or like was Opus 10 what kicked this over the edge for you?
I wouldn't say that. The deck was successful enough in Opus 9. Doga is really useful against more controlling decks, especially if they're playing 5 CP Yuna, or if they're Wind and they play Norse Talon and stuff like that. They really rely on those backups. So me being able to drop a Doga while they're developing and then later break some of their backups is actually pretty helpful. But even without Doga, the deck works. Even without Shantoto, it still works because that's only 4 cards out of the 50.
Yeah, and you know what? I think also it's more like the time that's passed. You've refined this list a lot, so it's more. You're probably like, this is probably one of the most optimum ways to do it, and you also just have so much practice with it, so that certainly helps a lot too.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of practice playing the deck. For sure.
Okay, so anything else that you want to mention about the deck before we move on to the star of the podcast?
No, go ahead and take the stage.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right, as the star of the podcast, I will take over here.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for.
Now, David, what did you bring to locals?
I didn't even bring myself.
Yeah,
and I've been working on that for a little bit. So, no, I didn't make locals. I had an early hockey game. I hated myself for it. I tried to make it work, but logistically did not work out.
Yeah, fair enough. That happens. I mean, I'm not going to make this week for a Christmas party, but then we have a Win-A-Box coming up soon, so there's going to be, I think people are going to be coming to play there, so we can get some pretty good insight into some of the decks that we're building and how they compete under pressure.
I'm interested to see people who don't show up very often or at all that will show up for Win-A-Box and see what they end up bringing along, probably their Opus 4 meta decks and stuff.
Yeah.
I'll feel sort of bad if that happens.
I think for the most part, like, there's a lot of people that have come and go from our locals, but a few of them are like buying new sets and updating their decks. They're just not making it out to the store that often, so hopefully they have some new cards to play with. Okay, so we're talking about my deck, and I decided to bring Ice Earth again because I'm really leaning towards playing this at Reunion in January, so I just need to get reps in with it, and I wanted to get reps with it that were with physical cards and not on a digital platform. So the main issue that I was having last week was getting my Chaos out, and I thought, okay, well, I have to go back to Camlanaut. So I tried some more stuff with like the new Cam Searcher that goes for Cam or for Eldenarsh, and I finally decided I'm just going to put more Earth in and go Star Sibyl. So there's lots of Star Sibyl targets, so I ended up putting 2 Star Sibyls in. I don't feel like I have as many things to break Star Sibyl for, but it's still like not a bad way to go. Like breaking Star Sibyl for a Kuja, Cam, or like a Reagan is a good play, and even a Gabranth isn't terrible. But so some other changes that I made, because I put the Star Sibyl in, I upped my Nagmoladas to 2, so I have more 11 targets. And I also have a forward searching Gabranth. I'm not sure that I had that last week, but basically all of these changes were to do one thing, which is to make the deck more consistent. I need to get Cam as soon as possible, get Chaos out as soon as possible, and then get Sephiroth and Flan and go from there. And then certain matchups get Scale Toad. Yeah,
so I've noticed that in your deck, you actually play 6 dark cards, which is quite a few, right? In my deck, I only run 5, and a lot of times I actually get stuck with multiple dark cards in hand. So, do you find that that's a problem for your deck at all?
You know what? It actually hasn't been. And this deck is built on Alex Hancock's list, and he was running 6 as well. He had double Reagan, double Gasol, and then a Cam Chaos in his list. And when you get the Gasol, that's breaking for Reagan and for Cam and stuff, and the Cam is changing elements, and so if you get the Chaos out, it's nice. The one thing that I have that he didn't have is the Hein, and he's mentioned in his new list that he's going to run it, and that's a card that does not leave the board. So once you play Hein, you have to play Chaos. You can't play any other dark cards. So you get, that's where you can get kind of stuck. But to be honest with you, that hasn't been the problem. I have had some times where it's like, well, I have 2 Gestals and I have to play one, and the second one is going to kind of clog my hand a bit. But other than that, it hasn't been that bad.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, for Hein or Reagan, you can always discard the dark card to do something. It's not really that big of an issue.
Exactly. And I have obviously used Hein's ability a lot. And I've used Reagan's ability twice. And both times it's when someone party attacked, I blocked and then blanked or reduced one of the party attackers and kind of cut them off. Well, I shouldn't have, because that's an ability that's on the field. You can see that I have that. So.
Yeah, but nobody reads cards. People swinging that stuff up.
Big time. So yeah, we'll talk more about what we changed about these decks, and you know what? I'm actually pretty happy with my deck. This week I'm gonna talk more about changing my play, and Julian's gonna be able to help me out with that. But for now, we're gonna talk about our actual matches that we played. Okay, so we're going to go through this round by round, and we'll start with Julian. What was your round 1 matchup, and how did it go?
Yeah, so my round 1 matchup was versus Earth Lightning, Warrior of Darkness, aggro kind of deck. Ended up in a win, 7-6, so an extremely close game there. My opponent is a very aggressive player who was playing a very aggressive deck. He played things like, Diana into Alba, dulling 2 guys and attacking. He had Eluas. So he did manage to get me to 6 damage very early. But like I said, my deck, gonna get those 2-for-1s. So eventually I managed to drop Iridia, play a Raiden, kill his guys, play another big forward like Cam, and I sort of just stabilized from there and won the game.
Yeah, I feel like with the deck, those 2 decks, if you can get through his initial hand ditching aggro and take a few hits, once you're stabilized and you start trading those 2-for-1s and cast some Phoenix, some Odins, some Raidens, there's not a heck of a lot he can do because he's just going to be top decking at that point, and he's not going to have the resources to keep up with you.
Yeah, that was interesting that you mentioned Phoenix, because I did try to cast a Phoenix at one point, and he actually misdragoned my break zone away, so I was unable to bring my Shantoto in.
Oof.
But that was not a play that I was expecting to see, and that was, pretty interesting.
I think we do need to start expecting more missed dragons, just because it shuts down WAF pretty hard when you can get it off, and also Wind Water when you can block out all their summons. But just in general, you're seeing wind lists run the White Mage back up again, and people try out the 5 CP Yuna, so I think Break Zone hate's coming back in a big way.
Well, especially because Break Zone Recursion is becoming such a big... that's becoming stronger and stronger and more prevalent, so yeah.
Well, they added it to every single deck with
every single
dark and light card.
Exactly. And even without it, they're getting cards that are recurring. So
Porum and Terra and all sorts of things. I watched a bit of that. Yeah, Luminous Puma. I watched a bit of that match, Julian, and he was coming at you so fast. And it's actually pretty scary because not only does Alua stop a lot of your removal, but Alba does too, because you had a Cam and a second forward out, and I remember twice he played a Alba to dull them both, and then all of a sudden Alba is hasted and can't be chosen by abilities
or summons. That is correct. Yeah. So when I play against that deck, even though he has no forwards on board and I have 4 guys out, I have to be very careful on if I swing out. I definitely cannot do that, because that's just a recipe for taking that last hit and dying.
That was my favorite part about playing Warriors of Darkness, and makes me want to play it again, is just the burst turns. It's so easy to have these massive 4 damage turns through 4 blockers if they have them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Very scary.
Awesome. So I played against Fire Earth in my first matchup, and it was a pretty easy game. I took 3 damage while setting up, and then kind of removed their forwards and established a board presence and didn't really look back. but the game was taking a while. So, and there was a few EX bursts, like Titan and I can't remember what the other one was, that were removing my forwards. So I wasn't getting in damage as quickly as I wanted to. So the game actually went to time, and that's where I started to get pretty worried. And I ended up having lethal. All I had to do was dull 2 ice backups to then break to bring Kuja back to my hand as part of my lethal. So, but first I had to cast an Apururu to grab back an Emperor Gestal, and then play the Emperor Gestal to do the actual the first break, and then a Kuja's dull freeze. But the way that I did it, I made it so that when the Kuja came out, I didn't have the ice backups to break. And so what I had in hand, I had a miner, and all I had to do was pitch the miner for the Pururu, and then play the Gestal, and then play the Kuja, in that order, so that I had ice backups to break. But I did it I used a Chaos and an ice backup to break, or to play the Apururu, and then didn't have ice backups to break. And then it was because of that, I could only do one of the things. So I played the Kuja by pitching my hand except for Gestal, and they were able to top deck a forward, play that, and then that stopped my lethal, and we drew in the end, which was pretty frustrating because it was just like a sequencing thing. But as soon as we went to time, I just started having all these thoughts like, oh my god, this game was going so well. I had it all locked up. Like, I did everything I was supposed to do, and now I'm going to draw, and I'm not actually going to get a win, and this is a really big deal. And for those of you that don't know, in competitive play, a draw would actually be a loss for you and your opponent. And when that happens, it's actually worse for you because your strength of schedule goes down because you were against a losing opponent and you lost a match. So it's a really big hit if you're trying to make a top cut. So you don't want to draw. So, and I'm obviously playing a slower deck, but I was pretty comfortable with my turns, with how fast I was playing. So that was something that I talked to my opponent about after, is that we needed to play that game a little bit faster.
Yeah, that's always a tricky one, right? Because again, if you're playing your best game and your opponent plays slow, there's not really much you can do about it unless you call them for intentional slow play. But even then, that's a bit iffy, right?
Yes, and my opponent is a lovely person and was not trying to slow play. She's playing a new deck that she had just built, and when you build a new deck, there's a lot of lines to figure out, especially if you haven't practiced with it yet. So she was pretty apologetic, and I felt bad for bringing it up, but I also felt it was important because I think at a certain point you have to, because there wasn't a world, if we had more minutes for that game, there wasn't a world where I was going to lose the game. Like, it was 6-3 and I had all my backups in full control, but I also need to work on my own composure so that I don't get rattled.
Yeah, for sure. And playing these multicolored decks, it's actually really important how you tap your CP, and I guess that just takes a bit of practice as well.
Yeah, so I was pretty frustrated at the time, but I guess the way to spin it is that I make these mistakes now and I won't make them at reunion. When I am in a pressure situation, I'll be like, well, I made that mistake once, I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Get it all out now.
Thanks, coach.
This is preseason.
Yeah, not the game. Okay, so let's go into round 2, and Julian, you'll start us off.
Sure. So in round 2, I played against Earth, Lightning, Ice, Rampier deck, which went on to win against everyone that night. So I obviously lost to this deck, and I lost pretty hard. I think it was 7-2 or 7-3. So basically what happened is my opponent played an early Hein, which is actually very difficult for my deck to deal with. I have a few answers, which include EX Burst, Odin, and Atmos, which, are not the most reliable of things. Another answer I have is Veritas, right? I can remove his other forwards and play a Veritas. But unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to draw my cam to search for Veritas. I wasn't able to find my branch to search for Veritas, and I didn't EX burst, so I sort of just lost that one in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, that's tough when you never really got to do what your deck is supposed to do.
Yeah, I did mention that Hein is difficult for me to deal with, and actually, in every single match that I played at locals this week, all of my opponents had Hein in their deck. So I do have to think about, moving forward how I can combat that card if I want to continue playing this deck.
Yeah, I think he's pretty tricky to... Sorry, my voice is starting to go. I was 2 days of coaching wrestling tournaments. So I think that you really have to just cheaply make them use his ability lots so that they start to feel like panicked that they're discarding. Because as a Hein player, especially against WoF, you're like, oh, I don't want to use it for every ping. I'm not going to use it for some pings. And then, but that's literally, they're not paying anything for it. So whereas with your deck, there's a lot of stuff you have to pay quite a bit for.
Exactly.
So that makes it a lot more difficult. Okay, so let's talk about my second match. So I was up against Mono Fire this time, and it was a Mono Fire WoF deck. So it's not going to have any of the Earth components of WoF, but it's going to have all of the Fire ones. Running a lot of Ifrits to kind of go with Freet, and a lot of summon recursion in the form of Citra and Terra. So it was an aggressive deck that had a lot of firepower, and they started very strongly, playing the 3 CP Opus 1 LAN, which is actually incredibly tricky for me to deal with because I didn't have removal for it right away, and I was playing... I ended up playing a Hein that stuck most of the game, but it couldn't block LAN. So I eventually pivoted to using Hein's second ability, where every turn I was dulling 2 of my opponent's forwards and just putting them in a stalemate while I built up my my backups. And this game, I actually had a difficult time. I only ever got to 3 backups until late game, so it's a good amount of backups to be on, but hard to play off of that for a full game when your opponent's at 5 backups, because it makes their top decks just super live. If it's a 5 CP forward, they can play it. So they're in pretty good shape. I played a Scale Toad, but he actually was able to break it with Ifrita, so I couldn't get that going either. So this game, I got to 6 damage and made a grand stand and brought it all the way up to the turns again. So this one also went to time, and again I talked to my opponent about it because I'm confident at this point. I play this deck enough that I'm not playing this deck slow, at least at locals I'm not. And there was a point where my opponent was picking between whether to recur an Ifrita and an Ifrit, and it was a lengthy process, and that's the type of stuff that we just have to say, like, well, you got to make a decision. But I didn't. I just sat there. So this went to time, and I again got very nervous, and I got to this point where I could have let him deck out. I also could have just played out my cards and attacked once and it left up multiple blockers. And I thought, well, I have to leave multiple blockers up, because if I don't leave multiple blockers up, he's got Yotsuyu and he can make my guy not block, and then he can swing for the win. So I start going through my turn, doing my sequence, and I get to combat, and I'm getting so excited because I've like dull frozen some of and removed some of his forwards, so he just has 1 left, and I'm like, he can't block me. So I swing, and then I'm just like, okay, swing again. And then as soon as I swing again, he takes the damage, and I'm like, I can't swing with that guy. I just lost the game. And it was just like a heat. Like I had planned the whole thing out of how I was going to win, and all it had to do was just not attack, because the next turn I would have had 3 forwards to his 1, and I would have just swung out for the win. So it was another frustrating experience.
That's kind of what I've noticed when your opponent is taking their sweet time with their turns, is that you'll have this big elaborate plan in your head, but then you also start thinking about. You start kind of overthinking it, even though you're thinking the same plan, and then when it push comes to shove and you got to pull the trigger, you'll still screw up, right? You get like some kind of yip situation.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I had so much time to think about it too, and I I really did plan it out because it was a big turn where he had rain, 4 CP lawn, and he also had a Terra, and I used a 3 CP squall to dull the Terra, dull freeze the lawn, and ping the Terra for 8k so that I could make sure he didn't have haste off the top of the deck and he wouldn't have a blocker that I'd have to, or that lawn wouldn't be up in time to attack or to block. And all he had is that Terra. And then all of a sudden I've got like Hind, Squall, and a third forward, I think a Kuja or like a Sid Alstein or something. And all I had to do, so I attacked with like the Sid Alstein, or no, I don't think I had Hind at that point. Because I basically, like, it was something that I wasn't able to...
You did have a Hind. You attacked with the Hind, though.
Was that the one?
And it was your Squall that you just played. So
Right.
he was able to make your Squall.
Yeah, so all I had to do was just not attack with Hind.
Yes, I was watching that.
Yes.
You were very frustrated.
Yes, because that was the silliest thing. I like thought to myself, why would I in a million different realities ever attack with that Hind? Because it's 2 blockers and it's got its discard ability. So I think I just kind of panicked, you know.
I guess another thing that you could do is you could always let your opponent, have their turn. Maybe they don't notice that they have Yotsuyu. Give them the chance to mess it up and give it back to you.
Yeah, I had a reaction where I was like, well, you know what though? I'm sure that he would have done it. I should have let him have the chance to panic and not do it.
Exactly.
But
I mean,
he was using it all game. Like he used it about 6 times.
I see.
The other thing though is that's still, if I had let him go, I don't think I had another turn.
Oh, I see.
So I think that would have I think that would have. Oh no, sorry, I did have one more turn. Turn. Yeah. No, yeah. So I had one more turn, and then I would have been able to win that turn. And if that final turn that I would have had, if I passed that turn, it would have gone to a draw. But he also had 2 cards left.
Right.
So he would have decked out the next turn, and that's again a question of, okay, if this game had been a little faster, I would have won by deck out as well. And when it comes down to it, the game didn't go faster, and we didn't get to the point where it would have gone to deck out, and I had the opportunity to win, so I have to win that way. I think that it's definitely given me a lot to think about for kind of improving in the future.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
So do we need to find a way to politely call people out on slow play where they don't get offended, or?
I think so. I think one thing you can do is you can always frame things in we and not you. Like using you is always going to put people on the back foot or make them defensive. So saying like, hey, I think we need to play a little faster now. Or, hey, I think we only have so much time left. I'd hate for this to go to a draw. Like stuff like that where you're in it together is a good way to start it, because then you haven't accused them of anything, but you're drawing their attention to something. Because
so diplomatic.
Well, that's the teacher. The teacher.
That's the teacher in you, yeah.
Yeah. But when it comes down to it, like both my opponents were slow for those first 2 rounds. And that's why we went to time. Like it wasn't. I'm comfortable saying that it wasn't me, because I have had so much practice with this deck that I'm very comfortable with it.
So. Yeah, exactly. So when the slow play starts screwing with eventually there's got to be enough is enough. You got to draw a line in the sand, because if that's 2 wins you could have had, that's 2 wins you could have had. Because now it's just affecting you.
I think that at tournaments I'd be fine. Like I've called judges at tournaments and stuff. Like I have no problem doing that. I think that at our locals in particular, there's been times where I've really thought about it, and I'm just like, well, you know what, it's locals, and I'm like, whatever.
They're all our friends, right?
Yeah.
So
it makes it more difficult, because I really like both my opponents. Like they're 2 of my favorite people to play. Like, well, one of them I went to Toronto with for the first Ice Crystal Cups. You don't want to do anything that puts a sour mood on the match, but if it was the win-a-box, maybe that's different. We'll see. But
well, I mean, at the end of the day, right? You can talk a lot about your opponent playing faster and stuff like that, But you did have a chance to
Yep.
win those 2 games by playing slightly differently. So
Yes.
maybe if we just step back and be a little bit more introspective, we can work on our own play and improve that way as well.
I totally agree. I think you're right. It's a classic sports thing too, like where you're like, oh, the refs like made this a bad call. It's like, well, why did you create a position where the ref had to make a call? Why not just put everything in your own control? And that's what I should have just put the matches in in what I could control. I could have won the match, so I should just worry about that.
Yeah, because ironically, when it is time, you have as much time as you want for your turn.
Yes, that's when I started to panic. Okay, so then the final round was Julian versus myself, and I was a little bit deflated at this point. So Julian, why don't you talk about that round?
Yeah, so I was playing against Alex, as you just mentioned, and he was playing his Earth Ice deck that he had put up on. He talked about it earlier, and what I remember was you played an early Scale Toad, I think, and in response to that, I basically put down a whole bunch of forwards, right? I had a Cam out, I had a Veritas, I had a Rydia, so I was removing your guys, and I was building my board presence. So at some point I had 4 forwards out, and you had ditched your Shantoto in one of the earlier turns. And I think Shantoto was, the star of this game, right? At one point, you did manage to play a Vayne, which locked down 3 of my 4 forwards. And when I tried to Phoenix it, you misdragoned to protect your Vayne. But then, oddly enough, you ended up Shantotoing your own Vayne away. And from there, I just had all my backups out, so I just replayed my forwards and finished you off.
Yeah, so in that game, I drew an early Shantoto, and I said to you, I don't think I'm going to be needing this, because you run like 16 forwards. I won't ever need a Shantoto. I played my Scale Toad, which I think you discarded to once in the entire game. You masterfully played your hand out, so you had 1 card left every turn, but didn't lose any efficiency because of it. And when I locked down your board with my Vayne, I thought, okay, this is temporary, and sure enough, you had the Phoenix, so I had to protect it. And I really wanted to hold on to that Misdragon to blank your break zone when you tried to do recursion with Miner, because I thought that was coming. So we ended up having these situations where, like, I think I actually, you traded into something, like a forward with one of your forwards. I removed another forward with a Sid Alstein or some sort of removal that I had.
Yeah, you Sid Alstein my Cam.
You Cam, right? And then all of a sudden, like and because I was in my own head from how my previous matches had gone, I didn't really realize that you were just down to 2 forwards. I ended up Shantotoing my own Vayne and only 2 of your forwards, and it was a horrific play, like total waste of Shantoto, total waste of CP, and then you were able to just reset up and kill me, and I wasn't able to stop any recursion that you might have had anymore because my Misdragon was gone. So I think that, like, what I could have done is I could have let you kill my Vayne, recur something, and then I don't know if I had the Shantoto to know that was fine, because I think I would have done that, but I also just needed to get my head back into a good space, because what you told me was that my Vayne could have just continued to lock down what you did have left, and I could have just kept playing my own hand out, and maybe I hold on to the Shantoto, but maybe I'm just back into the game with you, and we're just like getting into it. I did have a dead period though, where I drew Jill Nabat, Emperor Gastal, and then the next turn was Miner, Emperor Gastal, and I took like 3 points of damage during those turns. And I'm like, okay, I can't play. Like, I think I played an Emperor Gastal, and then I couldn't really do much else.
Yeah, I think because I had so much pressure on you the whole game, you had in your head that I really need Shantoto. I really need Shantoto. So by the time you actually managed to get her, you had that one goal in your mind that I have to play the Shantoto like right away, right? I think that's basically what happened.
Yeah, and at no point did I reassess the board.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, so I was disappointed after that, and I guess we'll talk about that next. Like, what are we gonna change in the future? What are we gonna how we're gonna make ourselves better players? So let's get into that. Okay, so before I do my little piece, Julian, what do you think about your deck?
So I'm still enjoying this deck a lot. One worry that I do have is obviously Hein. How am I gonna, combat that card? But more on that later. So, I mentioned that I did play against Rampier deck, which I lost to, but we've played two practice matches, beforehand, and I sort of stomped that deck pretty hard. So it's not the Rampier that was the problem, right? It was Hein.
So modest.
It's just true.
I just stomped that deck.
Before we started, my opponent was like, "This is such a bad matchup for me," because he knew that the chance of him winning was low. But
I'm just giving you a hard time. Carry on.
Another deck that I foresee that maybe coming to locals a bit more is WAF, right? And I haven't had much practice against WAF, and it's definitely a very worrying matchup. I did play 3 games against it for practice. Currently 2-1 with my current build, but the games are very tight. Considering making some changes, perhaps replacing a Galdes with a Dark Lord just for WAF, but I'm not sure if I want it.
Shadow Lord?
Yeah, Shadow Lord. Yeah, sorry, Shadow Lord. Yeah.
Alex's favorite card.
I love that card.
Yeah, so the considerations I have right now is that it's very good against WAF, right? They run a lot of 2 CP forwards. And it makes my free CP Shan total slightly better because I'll be flipping over free CP cards less often. But at the same time, it's, 8k body, same as Galdes, but doesn't have a lot of the other techs that Galdes has. Costs 1 more. I can't bring it back with Phoenix. I can't search it up with my Epitaph. So, I'm still considering that right now. And also, how do I beat Hein? I need your guys' help on this.
It does give you a search target for Star Sybil.
Oh,
which is nice.
Oh, right. I didn't think about that. That's interesting.
So I've heavily thought about playing it as well. And the reason that I'm not, I've also been looking at the Dark Emperor, because that also shuts off. That one shuts off Hein.
Right.
As well as it shuts off a lot of different action abilities in Water Wind and also Rampier and just like the Y'shtolas and stuff. So like I've been looking at the Emperor a lot, and so I look at them very similarly in that they're 4 CP 8Ks, which is just not good enough right now because that's a CP investment that costs you a lot. The one thing about Shadowlord that's kind of nice is the Brave, so that you can potentially start getting damage in while leaving a blocker up, which is pretty nice. But
that is true.
There's just so much removal. The nice thing about Shadowlord is that it's ETB relevant and not just a field ability that you have to keep out.
Right. That I might think about that Emperor just to beat the Hind. That's a very interesting suggestion.
You have to think about it like it's a summon, in that you're gonna play it
and then something else.
You're gonna but you're also gonna play it in pivotal moments, like late in games. Maybe you recur it if you can. Like, right. You can recur it and play it in the clutch spot to win the game, to shut off a Windwater's Pinello, or like whatever it is, like the Y'shtola to cancel one of your summons, or the Hind to be whatever. But otherwise it's just not gonna, a lot of times it's gonna be a pretty dead card. But it is actually relevant. It's really good against WAF too for shutting down the Tama recursion, which is a really, really easy recursion for them to bring back Rain.
Yes.
So it's not bad there either.
Yeah, the thing is that like playing, the Shadow Lord, this Emperor, I'm sort of diluting my deck, right? It's I feel like these cards are weaker because they cost more and they don't have, inherent protection. They don't, really do too much besides hose a certain number of cards, which I'm not sure I'm willing to do. So got to think about that for sure.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the Shadow Lord is worth trying. One kind of neat thing with him too is that he has his second ability to ping things. So
Right.
if you're able to like break something with Odin or Bahamut or Phoenix,
That's
and
true.
then you can like ping an Alua, you can like if you continued to cast summons, you could like keep pinging their hind, and like I don't know, they're probably not going to discard to it, but I bet you could catch a few people that way too that would be like, oh gosh, what's he going to do next? And then they discard to it. So there's like little things. But you have the good thing about those cards is that you can grab them when you need them. It's just about getting them in the break zone because your Luminous Puma and your Miner and stuff, like that's all gonna help you just grab those back.
Funnily enough, I did test with the Shadow Lord yesterday,
Huh.
but the problem is that it breaks free out of my 16 forwards because I play 2 Leos and 1 Undead Prince.
Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder about that Leo too. Is there anything else you think that might help your deck more?
I actually really like the Leo. For example, against a Scale Toad, I am more than happy to throw down Leo, right? It gets a card out of my hand, it's an attacker. And, if you Shantoto, Leo and some other guy, it's no big deal. It's just a 1 CP forward, so...
That's true.
And late game, he's like 10k or something like that. It's just very powerful.
Yeah, I think I need to see more of that guy. Yeah, it's a really tight list. It's hard to make any additions, and it's even harder to. The hardest part is taking stuff out, right? Like having to say,
Yes,
okay, well, what
yes.
am I going to cut? This is too hard. Like, what would you cut for an Emperor or a Shadow Lord?
It would probably be one of my 2 Galdes.
Yeah,
Just replacing a dark card with a dark card, because I think if I go up to 6 dark cards, it's just going to be way too clunky in an already clunky deck, right? I can just imagine drawing a hand of Odin, Raiden, Shadow Lord, Galdes, and Fusoya not being able to play anything, for example.
yeah, definitely. Okay, David, any comments on this list?
No, I really like summon-based decks. Usually you'll see it in a water list or in a water list. So it's really cool to see all your interactions with Earth and Fire and Lightning summons. And I really appreciate that you're running 3 of the Atmos, because not a card you see all that often.
Yeah, I love that card. Okay.
And I'm a homer, so FF9. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we'll quickly look at my list. I think the list is pretty good. I'm gonna cut a Vincent, 3CP Vincent, because I just don't cast him enough. All the times where I really need to cast him, it would be early game when I want to remove something that's whacking me, but I would have to go to like 2-to-1 backups depending on where I'm at, and I just don't think it's worth it. I think that would shut down my deck. So I'm looking at playing a Opus 5 Gabranth. So that's a 4 CP AK. If you received 5 points of damage or more, his cost is reduced to 3, and then you can put him into the break zone to prevent damage. So I think that's pretty relevant. It's nice against WAF because it's a body, and then if they do ping it off, you just sacrifice it so that you don't take damage. And then it can also be used for special fodder for the Opus 9 Legend Gabranth. So I'm going to try it out, because that was one of the things I was telling you guys too, that sometimes I have this issue where I just need to play some forwards, and in a game where my opponent's also not playing forwards, to just get out there and mix it up a little bit. So I'm going to try that out instead of the Vincent, and I'm still keeping some Earth CP, so I think that's going to be okay overall.
Why not just 2 of the Opus 9 Gabranth instead?
I thought about that too. I just I think that I'm pretty fine with the 1, because I have Ysael and Star Sybil searching out most of my 5 costs or higher.
Right.
And I don't search that many. Like the main one I need to get out is Cam and then Sephiroth. And then like Kuja's I'm just putting in the break zone. Sid Alstein's, you really for the most part search it when you can play it, or search it or like just want to draw it because you don't want them to know that you have one. Although that can be kind of mess with them. And then otherwise, I'm typically not searching too many dark cards again, unless I really need them out. Like if I'm gonna search Reagan, it's because I have an Emperor Gestal and I'm gonna do the combo, or I have lots of CP and I'm gonna just do like a recursion chain and try to do something with it. But I don't necessarily like searching them out early or anything, because it's just like it can clog my hand up a little bit. And I'm wary about these long games where, I was playing the mono fire player and he had 2 cards left. I had 4 cards left. So like I go through my deck. I go through my deck pretty fast. So that all being said, you could very well be right that I should just play 2 searchers, but I want to try this one out because it's a bit more of a board presence, and it's got that unique application for that defensiveness too.
That's true. Fair enough.
Yeah.
The thing with Gabrantha is like you put Gabrantha in the Opus 9, Gabrantha in your WAF decks, right? Because then you know what you're searching for every time. You want to get that rain. Whereas with this deck, it's not like there's a forward that you need down at all times, right? So there's nothing you really need to search out hard for. Certainly, situationally, there's probably something that, I need another Sephiroth, or they have no cards. I want to sit Ulstein. But there's not like one forward that you need at all times.
I do always want to get a Sephiroth early, but I mean that's part of why they use sales there and stuff. But I also I can set up a lot of ways. Scale Toad and Flan are a huge part of the setup as well, and so we'll just have to see. The other one that's kind of like the Emperor Opus 5 Legend has been fine. He's actually pretty good as a discard and then a 7K. I really want to keep him to see how he is in Wind Water, because against Ash and Pain, they're going to have to really deal with him before they play those cards, or just deal with all the Dolphries. Although Ash, I guess, kind of counters that as well, but it forces some modes. So that's one that I want to play around with a little bit more, but he's certainly on the chopping block.
Keep him in. Keep the faith. He'll put in work for you.
Yeah, no, we haven't played any Wind Water. There's been no Wind Water at our locals.
Everyone's playing WAF.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fire.
Everyone's playing fire, yeah, funny enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing that I want to improve on is my own playing. So I need to focus on kind of keeping myself in a good headspace. So the main thing that happened this week was I became frustrated or panicked, and then both of those would lead to me rushing. And then as soon as I'm rushing, I'm not making sound decisions anymore. I'm reacting a lot more. So I think that this is something that I've actually worked on before with sport as well. There's a sport training thing that I do, and I think I'm going to start to bring some of those techniques into FFTCG, but I also think that it's just going to be just having to make some of these mistakes and then fixing it, being I'm not going to do that again. But that's going to be I think I need to make sure that I'm not bringing frustration into my next match from the previous match.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Tilt is, problem that we all have to deal with. I tilt very hard as well especially when I misplay, so that's also something.
Yeah, well, you know what? We're all passionate players, and I think we're all pretty good players too. So we hold ourselves to pretty high standards.
Yeah, we gotta find a way, go for a walk or do a quick meditation. Yeah, I'll literally finish the game, sit there and brood, and then if I can find myself that I'm not shaking it, I'll just I'll walk outside and just do a lap to Starbucks, not even get anything, but just to get that separation from everything, just have a breath, come back for the next round and feel a little fresh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's funny because I do this all the time at work. When I started my current job as an athletic director, I would get so stressed and panicked, and I still get really stressed, but I don't panic nearly as much, and I don't rush nearly as much, because I am so much better at catching myself and saying to myself in my head, and that's a lot of it is you have to catch yourself. I'll say like, hey, you're about to send an email out right away. You like this person just sent it to you. They don't expect you to respond within 5 minutes. You could respond at the end of the day and they would think that's reasonable. And then all of a sudden your perception changes and you're like, oh, I have all day to deal with this problem. It's not just because I just read this problem doesn't mean it needs to be solved right now. So like that kind of mindset of catching yourself starting to rush, starting to get into this state, and then you say to yourself like, hey, hold on a second, you're doing this, calm down.
Calm down.
Yeah,
there's definitely so many ways you can relate it to like sports history, because in the same way that like I'll be playing football or hockey and I'll throw an interception or I'll let a goal in, and you just gotta have a memory of a goldfish. Like, okay, what am I learning from this? Okay, great, now it's gone. Like, there's nothing you can do about it now, so you might as well just let it go and focus on the next play or the next shot or whatever.
That's right, Americans. We have football up here and we throw interceptions just like you do.
Rarely though. I want to point that out.
Yeah, football's a lot harder in Canada because the fields are year round covered in ice, so it's like that level of a video game where you have to, when you move, your character doesn't stop where you expect it to, you keep sliding. So like quarterbacks can often use that to like, to run past people.
Baseball slide for an extra
Yeah, exactly.
4 yards.
Okay, we're getting very off topic here, and I think that it's about time to call it quits on this week. But before we do, is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about?
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Okay, well, I want to just take a quick moment to thank Julian for coming on. It was a pleasure having you, and you put up with our technical difficulties before it started, and just thank you so much for taking the time to be here this week.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was great.
And David, you're just, it's great to have you as always.
Didn't have much to contribute. Didn't have much to contribute, I just gotta say.
Well,
that's fair.
It's tough. Yeah, and it's just good. It's just good to have him here. It's just nice, knowing where else in the world would he be right now.
I know.
We're probably sleeping.
We're keeping him off the streets in a house on a mic. It's a good.
That's
thing.
True.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right.
Doing him a favor.
Okay, awesome.
This podcast is what set my life back on the right track.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this week's episode of the Mysidian Legend. Don't forget to use that promo code PORUMPALUM10 at cardsofevilise.com to get a discount on your order. And you can check out my articles, including the deck tech for Rydia of the Mist by Julian at themysidiapost.com, and you can also check me out on YouTube, so make sure that you sub to me on YouTube and throw me a like on Facebook because I need it. And then finally, we're
shameless begging.
Yes, just please do this. I need it so bad. So also, we're all gonna say thank you to FF Deck. So Julian, you say thank you.
Thank you very much, FF Decks. Keep up the good work.
David, you say thank you to them now.
Thank you, FF Decks. FF Decks.
F yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, Mysidians, and we'll see you next time. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Later, y'all.